But first, it is so great to see you all. Thank you very, very, very much for coming to this semester's edition of the endowed David James Poissant prose reading series named after our own alum, Jamie Poissant. I want to give a huge, huge thanks to Dean Gabriel Berenice, as well as Dr. Sandy Meek, for your spiritual, emotional, and financial support to make this reading series happen. Thank you guys so much. You help bring writers like the one I'm about to introduce. Stay tuned. Next semester in the fall, we're bringing essayist and memoirist Jericho Parms, who's an amazing writer who writes wonderful things about art and travel. So that'll be in the fall. But right now, I want to introduce my friend, Lina Maria Ferreira Cabeza-Vanegas. I met her, disappointingly, 14 years ago, which we realized last night while having dinner. We both got our MFAs at Iowa in the snow and in the slush, and we both live in very janky, super cheap, ex-military barracks that housed graduate students that were then bulldozed, I believe, a year after we left. Is that checked out? I think they bulldozed it right after we left. We were dead. We often found ourselves aboard the free bus that shuttled people to and from the barracks. And I often encountered Lina in a very frenzied and hurried state because, on top of getting an MFA in nonfiction, she also got an MFA in translation and was supporting her sister by doing various translation jobs, teaching, and working in a clinic for dissecting placentas. If you want to know more, you should definitely read her essay on cannibalism. It is seriously one of my favorite things. Even amid all of the colorful personalities that are at the University of Iowa, Lina stood out with her penchant for all black, her cunning stare, wry humor, and something I relate and want more now, a fearlessness when it comes to profiling morbidity, as well as monstrousness. She is one of those people that will casually mention outlandish things that at first you think are exaggerated, except the stories never change because they indeed haven't. Some facts about Lina, in no order. She has strong feelings about armadillos. She will drive across state lines if you are going through a tough time. She will visit you in the hospital. She was once accused of being a jet setter. She loves that the term hauntology exists. She owns and is currently wearing a Jurassic Park watch. She has such wisdom to share, such as, quote, every relationship is a panopticon, unquote. Another one, quote, just because I know something is untrue doesn't mean it can't also be true, unquote. Say yes, let other people say no to you. Quote, sharks have bifurcated penises just like a snake's tongue, unquote. Quote, don't write something good, try to write something bad, and you'll write more. And finally, one of my favorites, quote, a metaphor is just a confession of the failure of language, unquote. Lina was born and raised mostly in Bogota, and has since been, as she puts it, tumbleweeding around the world, including in China, Ohio, Iowa, of course, and now at the University of Chicago. She is the author of the really wonderful books, Drown, Sever, Sing, as well as Don't Come Back, which are on sale in the back. Also, if you would like, Lina is going to stay afterwards to sign books, as well as copies of her poster, which are back there. And those posters are free. She's a graduate at the University of Iowa, and her work has appeared in Arts and Letters, the Chicago Review, Fourth Genre, and she is a recipient of the very prestigious Ron Jaffe Foundation Writers Award. I would like it if you would all give her a very warm welcome. Please welcome Lina.
couldn't see this, but Clint was straddling the step stool upon which I stand because he has like a good foot or two on my height. I've been introduced a number of times, but never have I been introduced in a manner that I have to stand up here and go, let me explain half of those things and contextualize them. But I will not be doing that. I know that there are way more people to thank for this readings to happen than I am privy to, but I would love to thank Clint and Sandy and Mary College for having me here in this consecrated space that I will now perform great sacrilege in. I'm going to read a piece that I read rarely because it deals with the mortification of another's flesh and not my own. And that is a difficult thing to do with respect. So I read it only rarely. But if anywhere one should read a piece called Sacred Heart, it should be here. I will not tell you, I do not hope that you necessarily enjoy it, but I hope that you will find me worth its suffering and enduring. Thank you so much for coming out. I know that there's a Q&A afterwards. I would love to hear your questions. But with that, Sacred Heart. I was 15 in the year 2000, turn of the millennium, turn of tables and ties. Every morning there were reports on the radio, and every night the news showed footage of the peace talks between the Colombian government and the FARC forces. Folding tables and plastic chairs in a room with no walls, and I don't think anyone really thought anything would come of it. Still, we watched. The future of our country on the screen and on the precipice, history about to reassert itself or to buckle under the demands of men in white linen shirts and unofficial fatigues, sweating in unison under the uncompromising heat of San Vicente de Calma. At 9 p.m., the cameras settle on empty chairs and stern faces to capture the moment, the exact moment when we would all be remade by paper and pen, what we were and had been known for, had been seen as. For my whole life, and all of my parents' lives too, 2 generations worth and so many lives lost between, for that one moment we watched and we listened. Microphones, dress shoes, and rifles. What will happen next, they said. We'll have to see. On Sunday night, May 14th, what will happen next? We'll have to see. So I washed my shoelaces in the bathroom sink for school uniform inspection for the next day. While 3 hours north of Bogota, a man carefully placed a bomb inside a PVC pipe frame, like a hermit crab, into its shell. My mother went to school with nuns, my father went to school with priests. So when it came time to enroll their daughter, they chose the farthest thing from Catholic education that Bogota had to offer. Not an easy task. In 1902, the poet-president, José Manuel Marroquín, in an effort to heal the wounds left by the 1,000-year war, consecrated Colombia to the most sacred heart of Jesus. And though the solemn consecration was effectively voided in 1991, the revised constitution, to prevent religious discrimination, no one seemed to notice or care. In 2008, the Catholic Church renewed the consecration and once more made Colombia the officially El País del Sagrado Corazón de Jesús. The school they finally chose for me and my sisters was a Montessori-style institution founded by a former nun, run away with a former Argentine soccer player, and located far out into the countryside, encased by eucalyptus trees and divided by a river of slow sewage and green rot. So, at the age of 5, every morning, along with my older sister, in our uniforms and wool ruanas, we stepped into thick ambient mist. We navigated by memory through clouds of milk steam toward a green gate and a huddled group of bloodshot-eyed children yawning and ripping lunchboxes as our collective breath bathed into the mist and a guard with a loaded shotgun sipped coffee from a fence. I remember the brown birds bathing in the gutter, stray dogs barking in the distance, and the voice of morning radio hosts rising from the guard's portable AM radio. Football scores, daily bombings, and the news about Luis Herrera's latest bicycle race, La Vuelta a España, El Giro d'Italia, the Tour de France. Ivanes Lucharegos are brutal, the radio host shouted. Our Lucho, they said. Go, Lucho, go. Viva Colombia. Until finally, a sheet metal car came rumbling like stage thunder, like stagehand thunder, and the driver yelled, "Hurry up, let's go." We don't know much about this man and this night, the PVC pipe, except for a few unreflected facts. One, that around 4 in the morning, he, along with at least 2 others, walked in through the front door of the home of Ana Elia Cortez Gil, the one she shared with her husband, Salomon Pachon. 2, that they wore ski masks and military fatigues. And 3, that they wanted money. There is conflict about nearly every other detail of these 3. Sometimes the men arrive at 3 in the morning, sometimes at 4. Sometimes there are 3 of them, and sometimes there are more. Always, though, it ends with a single woman with a single bomb strapped around her neck. Is there a knock? A whistle? A slender frame climbing in through the open window of a small brick home? A hand sliding back the curtains and then sliding back the wall so the rest could slither in through the house like mustard fog in black mist, so they could place their hands down on sleeping bodies like orderlies, like exorcists, like rubber-gloved men on slabs of live wire eels. Was the bomb zipped into a school backpack? A hitman's duffel bag, wrapped in newspaper and bubble wrap, tied up in old shoelaces and string, placed gently into a plastic grocery bag and held carefully in both arms like a sleeping baby, like an egg on a stool, like a bowl of water filled to the brim, like a ticking time bomb. Do the men accidentally knock over the statue of Jesus on their way in? Or do they intentionally knock it over on their way out? Perhaps they kick down a wood panel door. Perhaps it goes flying out in splintered splendor of wood chips and loose hinges. That feels true, right? Cinematic. The soul of a boot, the crack of a door, and the sound of men yelling like Bayusi Barbudas, ahora sí que sí. Wake up, motherfuckers, now you'll see what's what. At school, we started running Mormon girls after a rumor that Pablo Escobar was planning to bomb a school in Bogotá. On November 27, 1989, he had taken down a plane from a commercial airline, and 106 people died of it. Avianca flight number 203 from Bogotá to Palmira, which a man who would later become president was scheduled to board, but who was miraculously spared at the very last minute for a cancellation. Thank Jesus, he said. Thank my guardian angels, divine intervention is what it is. At 7:10, the Avianca flight lifts off. At 7:11, the wheels have retracted and ears begin to pop. At 7:12, nervous passengers are still gripping the crosses around their necks and whispering prayers. At 7:13, they have likely reached 6,000 feet, and the earth below is a porthole postcard. At 7:15, it begins to feel normal again. It is almost over. We can become accustomed to anything at all, even this, air and speed and planes like pot-bellied birds in a windstorm. At 7:16, it is over. A roaring fire at 10,000 feet, an explosion like a halo of sharp teeth and a spinning crown of metal forms, confusion, noise, and gravity. What was left of the flight and its passengers landed in Suacha, less than a 2-hour drive from where I spent most of my childhood. Just like a crash heap. A woman who saw it firsthand told me years later. Pale ash, white paint, low red flames, and charred black bodies. Both, unmistakably and barely discernible all at once. An open grave and a scrap heap. Just like that, she said, when I asked her, un basurero, but with people in it. So, at school, we ran the drills on a rumor alone, because in the 90s, everything seemed possible. Same way the darkness makes the horizon infinite, and a hand in the fire can stretch minutes into miles of time, wax candle finger light, and time burned down to wick and bone. It is unclear now if school belongings were ever on the table, really, or in anyone's mind. But then, that's the point of terrorism. Oh, the places you belong. I remember teachers arranging us into groups down the main building's hallway. They paired us and unpaired us, told us to stand up straight, to sit in circles, to cross our legs, and then to kneel, to keep our eyes wide and then keep them shut and pray, and to be well done, dulce compañía, to never ever run until we are told to, oh my guardian angel, my sweet company, and then to run, never ever look back and run. We were told to run, so we watched them, wave their arms like flight attendants, raise their voices and pace up and down the hallway as if trying to correct the course of a river with nothing but a paper cup. While we traded snacks and marbles and secrets we borrowed from older kids and whispering parents, because though no one said it out loud, we weren't scared. We were too odd and too small a school to matter, and our insignificance kept us safe. The most likely scenario is that the men who went in neither slid in nor out. Men who dream up bombs you can strap around women's necks are not creatures of nuance and subtlety. Instead, they kept it simple. They cut the lights, they poisoned the dogs. 4 explosive-filled sections of PVC pipe that fit around the head of his neck. Strap it on, tape it up, leave pre-recorded instructions. In an article in El Tiempo, a journalist described the voice on the tape as nasally and cavernous, but with excellent diction. Pay close attention, it said. Mr. Pachon and Mrs. Cortez, this caller is a bomb, and you have 10 hours. Every morning, we piled aside small remote war that rattled like a mouthful of loose teeth, and we watched our parents make the sign of the cross from the door to the road, to the gate, again and again and again, like blowing kisses, like throwing darts. The yellow Renault 4 wedged tightly inside both that traffic and kids, wedged even tighter inside. Not me. I was 5. I was small. I sat in the front seat on Andrea's, the oldest girl, lap until we reached the right intersection at the right time. A red light and a red face man. That's how you knew it was right. Because Andrea knew what she was looking for. Always older, always behind a wheel, almost always with a black mustache and a round belly. And always, almost always, I would think to myself, that man looks like Pablo Escobar. Could be Pablo Escobar. Is it Pablo Escobar? I was 5, I didn't know. But by then, Andrea had already began the thing she always did when it was right to do. Eye contact, smile. The man smiles back, lips, tongue, and an obscene gesture. And then, Andrea would gently push me off her lap very, very slowly, and very, very slowly begin inching up her skirt. Antian mist, bad traffic, and a Jehovah's Witness named Marlene driving half a dozen rowdy kids to school. So at first, no one would notice but me and the truck driver. The red and white stripes of the prestigious all-girl Mater Catholic High School climbing up Andrea's legs, like each one's measuring the length of her thighs. And Andrea was a master of the art. She would pace herself, pull gently on her skirt as if rolling a cigarette, as if drawing a tiny curtain, a slow-motion film, rewound and reversed slowly, methodically, under the glow of her private red stoplight district, the hem of her skirt like a minute hand ticking back, closer, closer, higher, higher, while the truck driver's eyes grew wider and wider and wider, and then leaned farther and further back, out his window. It was perfectly timed, a stop-motion race toward the finish line she never reached, because the light always turns, and Marlene always noticed. And Andrea, she finally yelled, "Not again!" Doña Elia lived in a home called Hope, in an area known as Sanctuary, on a street named Palestine. La Esperanza, el Santuario de la Palestina. White walls, gray tiles, and red flowers up front. This was a home where she raised her sons and planted her corn, where she raised her chickens and fed her dogs, where she fell asleep to the sound of her husband's breathing or the croaking sounds of answering nights. When she woke, where she woke, well before blistering sunrises bled through the white gauze mist, and she could tend to the day-to-day of a country road farm. A wool sweater, a brown jacket, her breath rising like steam as she rubbed her hands together and began to milk her cows. Maybe she hunted herself, maybe she fiddled with a radio antenna until she got something. Soccer scores, reports for information, Lucha Herrera's bicycle races in the 90s, and Juan Pablo Montoya's Formula One in the 2000s. Vamos, muchachos, vamos, viva Colombia. A quiet that grows in what is left of the night like fistfuls of black dust and blue stars, before a white winged dawn scatters them across the cold Savannah morning. Time and night and silence, as she filled bucket after bucket, container after container, skin to skin, plastic to metal, no automation beyond her wrist and her wristwatch. I lived in a small town when I was 5, not far from roads like those of La Palestina. A milkman came to our doorstep with an aluminum cylinder sloshing about with big white liquid as he measured it out with the dented lid. And I remember watching his hand, his whole body mechanically molded around the motion of pouring milk from the container into the lid into a plastic jug my mother held out with both hands, all the way to the brim. Never a spill, never a splash, one into the other, into the other, into the other, when the lid folded back finally into it, like his hand folded back into the handle, and he folded back into the fog. So this is how I picture her, too. Milk foam, callous hands, strong coffee, and persistent mist, while she pours in perfectly measured motions, like flawless memory and practiced recitation. Some reports about this evening are vaguer than others. Spanish lends itself to the fogginess of ambiguity. Se rompió, se quemó, se mató, se voló, se escapó, se cayó, se suicidó. Reflexive, blameless verbs with tacit, free radical pronouns. It fell, it flew, it fell, it fell, it burned itself down, it blew itself up, it cut itself to pieces. War was started. Peace was being negotiated. The call was made. Some reports point to a neighbor making the call. Others, though unequivocally, state that it was Salomon, Doña Elvia's husband, clutching the receiver. Please, I imagine him saying, please send someone. But then, regardless of who made the call, the person on the other end would have had to ask, what has happened? So what does he say? What does anyone say, and how do they say it? How does one begin to explain PVC made into an IED, made to fit around a woman's neck? There were these men this morning, 3, maybe 4 of them, at 3, maybe 4 a.m. Do you see? They wore skin masks and fatigues, but not the official kind. You know who? Yes, like that. They had a backpack or a grocery bag or a rain-soaked cardboard box, and they pulled this thing out of it and strapped it around a woman's neck, my neighbor's neck, my wife's neck, around my neck. How does one explain the foresight to record a tape? The time it must have taken them to install the bomb around Doña Elvia's neck that very morning, how still she must have had to sit, how still she would have still had to be sitting as the call was made. In that chair, in that house, in her chair, in her house, her farm, her country, her Palestina, waiting. Where does one start? Where does one stop? Please, just hurry. They said they had remote control. They said not to call the police. Please, they said 10 hours. Does Salomon look over his shoulder then, mid-call, back to check that it is not a terrible dream, a dark mirage in the morning mist? Does he give up at some point and simply hold up the receiver to the tape recorder and press play? By 5:20 a.m., the police were on their way, and there were 9 hours left. Not just the police, but a man named Jairo Hernandez Lopez, a man who had been, at that very moment, sitting down for breakfast in a home he shared with his siblings, mother, wife, and 5-day-old son. According to an article written by a journalist named David Leonardo Carranza-Munoz, on May 2016, his mother was already making lunch plans while Jairo Lopez, home for the day, asked her not to be too stingy with the chicken. Put a whole lot of it in, he said. Not all rice, lots of chicken too. And I imagined her lifting the lid, puffs of white rice steam and white meat smelled while a white mountain mist taps on the window and the radio announces recites the latest soccer scores, the latest peace talk reports, the latest casualties, and the latest news. Juan Pablo Montoya's latest race. Formula One, first Colombian, bet they didn't even see that coming. Won't see him coming either. Go Juan Pablo, I'm Juan Pablo, viva Colombia. Then the phone rang. Hushed tones and clipped sentences. I'm going to Chiquinquirá, Jairo Lopez told his family as he hung up the phone, because there's a hell of a mess over there. And they need me. And then there are 8 hours left. The men wanted 15 million pesos delivered by that afternoon. Simple. About 10 hours, about $7,500. Not simple at all. But we don't have that kind of money, Lina and her husband replied. Not you, the men in ski masks. Said, in a house surrounded by the poisoned bodies of dead dogs, dead farm dogs. But one of your sons, the one who works at the bank, tell him to get it. 15 million, $7,500, 15 million pesos, 10 hours. This is, for the most part, in the world, even now, an exorbitant sum. And even more so for the 53-year-old Anahelia Ortiz, who woke up every morning to feed 12 chickens in the yard, to milk 6 cows in the field. In many, many ways, however, this is also a paltry sum, insignificant really. Not by inflation or adjustment, but by sheer cosmic contrast. A 7-pound head, almost around a pound. All things remembered and forgotten, all things learned, all things ignored, every private joke, every embarrassing moment, the way her mother would clutch her handkerchief during Mass, the way she herself used to like the way her hair fell on her shoulders, the day she decided it was too much work to keep it long, so she cut it, the sound of her husband asleep beside her, the sound of the baby awake in her arms, every thought she'd ever had, every word she would ever speak, every secret she would never tell, everything. 7 pounds. 10 hours, 15 million pesos. The click, tick, countdown pulse, the black powder bomb pressed against her neck. That son of yours? Tell him to. He works at the bank. The threat to snap a whole life off the tip with a firecracker pop. 7 pounds, 10 hours, $7,500. Ana Elia Cortez. And if you tell anyone about this, it's your whole family that will pay. And then death will seem like nothing, the reporter said. Doña Elia was not allowed to remain in the home cold open. By 7:30 a.m., an anti-explosive team had arrived in Doña Elia's farm, and it was decided that she would be moved to a remote part of a rural highway, which they had wrapped in caution tape as if trying to stop a bleeding wound. Just in case. You never know. Regardless of the warning, people gathered, staring and pointing while officers waited for the IED specialist to arrive. On the other side of the perimeter sat an area, a cement block by the side of the road, a highway pulled up with a PVC cover. Among those gathering, I imagine, must have been Doña Elia's neighbors. People she knew from the market, from Mass, people from surrounding farms and nearby towns, people who had gone without their milk that morning because of this. And I wonder, did any of them wave at her from afar? Shout, "What's that around your neck?" or "Hang in there"? Were they already huddling and whispering about the spark, about tactics and bombs and explosions and extortions? Or was it the reporters from the Capitol who said it first? Pointed with lenses and sharpened their pens. Who else could? Who else would? This fits. Not exactly them, but not exactly that either. Last spark. They've done it all before. They're doing this now too. And I picture people testing the police state like velvet rope, like a spider's web, like a trigger wire. 7 hours left. These things take care, time, practice, and patience. To know the width by touch, to understand capacity by sight, to remember lanes and depths in the dark and in the mist and inside, a sweating ski mask, to know all this, to know exactly how much dynamite fits inside a PVC pipe. Though this was not a sophisticated device, according to a 5-volt report, just black powder inside galvanized PVC tubes, which one of the IED expert later described as 4 sections and a syringe with liquid that on contact would make the whole thing explode. Another expert, however, stated that it must have taken the terrorists a long time to make it. Time to design, time to think up, time to make it so hard for authorities to deactivate. Time and time and time, and black powder and time. Simple. A man in a room putting pencil to paper and powder to pipe. Not so simple. Because to take the risk and to take the time, one must really want to make a bomb, which in the making wants only to take the maker's life. A man building a bomb is a man screwing steel-cut fans inside a starving lion's mouth while he sleeps. Not simple. Because it is 1,000 hours of staring bomb. It is made of living room pacing and beer room discussions. Should we stay and explain it? Should we even know? If not a note, then what? But is it a team effort for the work of a single man? Does this one man draw it out on a napkin first? Does he buy the pipe himself? Is it just laying around in the yard and all he has to do is gather the pieces that fall free? Does he measure carefully, draw lines, notches, and red markers where he needs to cut to sand to glue? Does he make a mistake and feel stupid? Because it's a stupid mistake to make. Or does he yell at himself and start over? Or is he very good with his hands? Does he like the work and does he surprise himself when he gets it right on the first try? Surprises himself again when he is strapping it around her neck. How well it fits, how easy, how smart. Or does he know, like the milkman knows, because he has done this before and all he has to do is look the width of her neck, the length of the pipe, the amount of black powder. Is he a planner and he's had this bomb made and ready for 2 weeks in advance? Does he hum to himself while he builds the bomb? Or does he listen to reports of the peace talks on the radio like the rest of us? Soccer scores, casualties, and one. Does he grow up listening to Lucho Herrera pedal out the Alps? Does he cheer Juan Pablo Montoya as he drives around the vicious cycle track? Or does he sit in perfect silence, thinking only of the money, how much it can buy, how far it can take, and people would value the U.S. to be ours? As far as China, maybe, California, and the house, Chicago. Does he ever think about the idea while he builds the bomb meant for her neck? Because he must have known her, because the town is small and the roads are narrow, because it takes time too, it takes practice too. Maybe it wasn't simple at all. As practice makes perfect, repetition makes numb. So maybe that's all it is. It's hard out here, grow some balls, dog eat dog, get with the program, be a man. He built the bomb. The bomb was built. Poisoned her dogs. Her dogs were poisoned. He made a tape and placed an explosion around the woman's neck when she refused to pay. Because it happened to be what happened to happen. Because it needed to happen. She would have paid up. She'd done it before. Like a kid wedding. Do you really want to know? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. If you really are, I am, then you should ask Lina. That's what my mother told me. If you want to know, ask Lorena. Lorena is a mother, a nurse. She is from Colombian countryside, like most farm recruits. So, you see, one day I did ask. Things are easier and harder out there, she told me. It's nothing like the city. Easier how? Oh, you know, she leaned back. There's always something to eat out there, you know? Out there you never starve. In the city you starve. In the dark, she told me this, beside her sleeping charge. And it was hard to see her face in the shadows. to count the wrinkles and interpret her scars. As I tugged at strips of skin around my fingers while she spoke, I did this. For this, at least, I was grateful for pain. Because even in the dark, I felt myself trying to guess her age, to match her years to this or that car bomb, to this or that massacre. As here in the city, she said, in the city you starve every day. I kept pulling on strips of arid skin, and I unwrapped my fingers like a toilet paper honey. Out there, though, I pressed my thumb into the raw edge of my finger, droplets of blood emerged. Red dew on a pink salamander skin. It's something else that gets you out there. Doña Elva's eyes are cast downward as she waits for the specialist, as she tries to hold up the PVC pipe collar with her left hand. The tighter black powder is packed, the heavier the bomb becomes. And I wonder if the edge of the plastic is cutting into her skin, if she feels like the bomb itself is trying to make her kneel before the mighty God of dynamite. It is likely that there is another God beneath the PVC collar bomb too. Likely that it is him to whom she pleads, a gold Jesus hanging from a little gold crucifix like the one around most Colombian necks. Same, likely, as the one hanging from the bomb maker's neck. Does she think about him in that moment? As she waits for one man to cut a wire and another to press a button? Is there mind to spare for this thought, for her children, for her chickens, for herself? Is it hard to tell much? It is hard to tell much from the image of that moment that I left. A woman in a thick brown coat, white earrings and short curly hair dyed reddish brown. The one thing is clear. She looks tired and afraid. Every article mentioned. Pipe wrapped around her neck, tape wrapped around the pipe, and the look as it is to ask, why? As Officer Lopez finally arrives at the scene. What did they say to, why did they do this to me? While the weight of a bomb around her neck tries to bring her down to her knees, I haven't done a thing to anyone. And it doesn't take me too long to realize how much she reminds me of my mother. 6 hours off. By most accounts, Doña Elvia was quite nervous the entire way through. I don't think anyone could blame her. An article I can no longer find but remember distinctly quoted the tape as giving her husband advice because you're going to want to give her some tranquilizers. A cavernous nasal voice with excellent diction. These things are hard on the nerves. But how does the bomb maker know this? Had he had something hanging around his neck too? Felt the beating of his heart against the ticking of a bomb before? How the pipe presses down on the cross around your neck, buries Jesus deep in purple skin. Did he actually feel the scrape of a PVC pipe against his own skin buns? And did he take the time to sand the edges down so that this would not scrape her quite so badly? Or is it guesswork? Did he care? Why say it at all? What is the point? Did he hate the radio, maybe the scores, the music, the dead, all that talking about peace and nothing ever new? Did he want to run away and never turn back? Never to see that miserable field again, those stupid creeds? Did he know how to build anything else? A model airplane, a wooden horse? Did he, more than anything, want Colombia on a rearview mirror through a portable postcard? Lorena has a broken face. She's quick on her feet, and once, when a man tried to beat her, she took a kitchen knife and swung it so hard she sliced through his leather jacket. Did it cut him bad? Didn't cut him bad, but that was the last time he ever tried anything with me. There's both an edge and a bluntness to her, sickle, hammer, and nerve. She's very smart, someone else told me. It's obvious, look at her. And I knew by the tone in her voice that what she meant was, be careful. She's smart. So, you ran away from home when your mother's boyfriend moved in, I asked her. Yes. Just like that? Yes. And then you kept on running? Uh-huh. For how long? Years? And then, well, these guys, she said, looking absent-mindedly at her phone. They sometimes come around to our towns, out there like that. Cold, light, and dark room. With their guns and their camos and their boots, whole lot. I pulled them dog-eared skin and imagined my fingers coming undone at the seam. Good guys, though, Not like these they say sometimes. They were always very nice to me, she said. And I waited. Silence and time. I felt years of memory, of nightly news, images, and radio reports sitting on my chest, pouring their hot breath into my nostrils. Bodies in the rubble, in the ditch, in the field. Where's Waldo Tableau of human parts, of human lives? And I tried to not, as she spoke, I tried to help the moment pass, to hear the story for what it was, but I felt my breath catching my throat like a paper kite on a metal hook. A hand-me-down war, and all these bomb technicians with their hands blown on time and time and time, and black powder and time. Finally, I managed. They were nice too. Yeah. Nice how? Oh, Lina said. They would show me their guns and teach me how to shoot them. And this guy, big nice guy, commander, he told me, if you ever want to come join us, you're more than welcome. And what was it like? One day, and that was it. That was it. One day, I had enough of my mom and her boyfriend. Come on, Papa, drive faster. Come on, Lucia, pedal faster. Come on, let's go, Viva Colombia. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. Jairo Lopez had planned to stay home that day, taking care of his wife and 5-day-old son. It wasn't his ship to take. According to a Chiquinquirá publication, the Brigade of Military Institutes of Tumpa had, upon learning of the situation in Palestina, immediately commissioned their top expert in explosives to deactivate the device. This top expert, however, was away on an important mission. So, it fell upon the expert's young assistant to deactivate the bomb, the 28-year-old Jairo Lopez, who, by 8:30 that morning, was already carefully sliding his hand across the casing around the head of his neck. In the distance, officers held her husband back as he tried to explain that he needed to be there. Just let me go, I need to go, I need to be with her. So he could hold his wife as Jairo deactivated the bomb. In my mind, the officers dig their shoulders into Salomon's chest and lean into him as if holding back the blood with their bare hands, heels into the dirt, hands around his wrist, and the sound of a handsaw scraping against the PVC pipe bomb. But this is unlikely. He was 67 years old, and it was more likely, very easy to hold him back. One hand on his chest and a few stern words. Please wait here. Please let us work. We are doing all we can. Not long now, 67 years old. And a 2.25 hectare farm. 6 cows, 12 chickens, 2 children, one whole lifetime married to a woman, now trembling at the side of the road, one whole life together, while hers runs out the clock. Perhaps nothing holds him back, and he is already embracing her across the short police distance. 5 hours later. The first thing Lina promised me was that she'd never seen combat, though I never asked, though this seems unlikely. I swear it, she said, unprompted in the middle of the story. We were so lucky in the middle of the question. I thank God and the Holy Virgin Mary every day for it. In the dark and in the fall, at the start of a new peace negotiation, she promised, I don't know how I could live with myself if I had seen combat. I swear. Again and again. Finally, I said, Lina, tell me, why did you leave? Within an hour of Jairo Lopez's arrival, as he stared into the ticking heart of an IED, Officer Jairo Lopez had already decided that this mechanism is not too complicated, and he'd already begun to disassemble it himself. Don't you worry, Mr. Ferreira, he told the Ferreira as he maneuvered through wires and needles and pockets of chemicals longing to burst, and still and sucking all the air in a roaring gust of noise and fire, stayed very calm, he repeated, as he stood there in his shirt sleeves, muy tranquilo. Because, he explained to the other officers, the blast suit would only make her more nervous, so he didn't wear shirt sleeves alone. And isn't this hard enough for her? Almost there, Jacassa, he tells her. Wear nothing but cotton and skin, in the court of God and dynamite and death. Won't be long now. He snipped in patiently, wire after wire, like the tiny roots, tiny trees growing out of black powdered dirt, like he's trying to keep a miniature forest of untamed fire and sprouting around Elliot's neck. Stay very calm, he repeats, because in a few minutes I'll be done and we'll go get some lunch together. In fact, I'm buying. But Elia is having trouble remaining calm. Too much time has passed, and she's finding herself staring up as the sun slithers across the open sky. And she says again and again, they said they had her remote control. They said it wasn't a timer. They said 10 hours, 10 hours, 10 hours. Only a few strings left holding up the sky. Only a few wires left to cut, only one man left to cut them, and one woman struggling to hold up her head. They said they would know if we called, they said. Does she know? Right then, she glanced out along the perimeter, turned her neck as much as BBC and Officer Lopez will allow, for a glimpse of the TV crew. Please stay very still, Domenico. Does she spot one of them in the crowd instead? Or does it take every bit of strength in her to stay still, to control the animal memory bucking in her blood, begging her to stop waiting, to take the bomb off herself, to shake it off like mud, to hiss, to howl, to sprint into the woods, get it off, get it off, get it off? Too much time has passed, and this may be all she can do to keep herself from thrashing and wailing and chewing her way out from the PVC trap. But does she regret refusing to pay such a paltry sum? Does she lock eyes with a man that may or may not be staring back at her from the crowd, the perimeter, may or may not have built a bomb on his kitchen table the night before? And is that when she looks at Officer Lopez as he snips another cable and asks, "You're not going to let me die here, are you?" 4 hours left. Silence. For a long time, Lorena said nothing, and I bit down on the last thread of skin, pulling my head back as if on a paw in a steel-toothed crab. "What do you mean?" Lorena asked. "Well, they took care of everything, gave you everything, that's what you said, and no combat. So why leave?" "Oh," she pursed her lips, and looked out the window, a partial moon across an impartial sky. "You know," she said, "things were..." She looked down at her phone. "They were different, you know." I didn't know, but I nodded all the same, tried to make it pass. It was different and I was different, even in the dark. I could see the angle of her features hardening. And it's not like you can just pick up and go. "Wouldn't want deserters," I said, leaning back against the wall. Saint statues above my head, the image of the Virgin to my side, a cross around Lorena's neck and on the mantle. Jesus, with his sacred heart hanging out of his chest with a red bell around his neck, like a scarlet paper kite caught in a metal hook. Less than thin-skinned is Jesus, worse than skinless. This image of the poet president Jose Manuel Marroquin looked upon and thought, yes, that is us, that is Colombia, that will do it, this will protect us, this will heal us. Yeah, I insisted. But Lorena, what was different? She drew breath and pursed her lips. She looked away, and I thought I saw her reach for the gauze around her neck before saying, "There was this boy, See? He was in love with me. He helped me get out. Sweet boy. I opened my mouth to speak, but Lina, she shook her head and touched her lips. God knows, she said. God knows he knew the risks. The risks? I mean, what do you mean? Silence. The darkness can be anything too. Hands in the fire and miles of black tar time. Lina, I asked again, what do you mean? Another boy, maybe a sweet boy, Lina didn't remember, had been caught trying to escape a few weeks before Lina made her run herself. Young, though, you know. You know the sort. She pursed her lips again. The unlucky sort, you know? And furrowing her brow, she said, but nice. A nice, unlucky boy. Then she insisted that she did not know him well, though I didn't ask. Again, I didn't. Not at all, not well, not well at all, she said. Again and again, not at all, not well, not well, not at all, not me. I did not see combat. I did not see combat. I did not see combat. Not well. Not at all. Then, one more time, unprompted. He was nice. Nice and young and eager to leave, for who knows why and who knows where. But then they caught him and decided to make an example of him. They tied him to a tree by the neck with barbed wire. Lina said, looking out the window and resting her chin on her hand, as I imagined a barbed wire leash and a man at the end of it, brought down to his knees before the god of failed revolutions. Because he couldn't stand up straight, right? See, like tied there to the base. You understand, Lina, right? Silence. Black powder. Barbed wire. And silence. Anyway, he died. And this other boy, I didn't know. Other boy, he had to bury him. The sweet boy, yes. The one who knew the risks. After that, we all knew them. A pause. A barbed wire noose and thorns wrapped around the sacred heart. A 7-pound head. A 10-ounce heart. And all that they contain. Everything done and undone, remembered and forgotten, inscribed between the soft folds of gray walls, like scratches in a prisoner's wall, and nothing but bone to hold it all with. A man, stripped down to his underwear, kneeling beside the big trunk of a saber tree, while rusty spikes dig into his neck. Asphyxia blue and infection yellow, a hole in his leg where a porcelain skull seemed atop a shelf, while madmen swing their bats. The boy who helped me, I think he did know the barbed wire boy well, or maybe not well, he knew him. I don't know. It was hard for him to bury that boy though. It took a long time to bury him. Had to cut him down and out with pliers, you know? And then, anyway, he knew about me, how I wanted to leave. And that was that. Officer Hydrolocus is made of tempered steel and spider silk. Not a chance, Vanaria, he tells Vanaria, while taking the bomb apart, piece by piece. From this one, you and I have both getting out scot-free, reading very carefully and digging expertly through cables and plastic. Does he think of his newborn son back at home? Of his police officer wife cradling their child? Does he think of his own mother cradling him after his father left her alone with his siblings, and how she brought them all up on her own, how she's cooking for them still, chicken meat, lots of it, not just rice, pulled apart, piece by piece, like BBC pie corn? Doesn't that area remind him of his mother too? By Monday, almost there, nearly done, he tells her, the man again. And perhaps he doesn't think of anything but these cables. He doesn't need her to be reminded. He doesn't need to be reminded of anything. This is his job. He doesn't need a reason. Like he did not need a father. And this is how, despite Colombian custom, he takes his mother's last name and gives that name to his son too. 5 days before, he takes the one apart. Piece by piece. You won't let me die, will you? Not a chance. 3 hours left. Doña is famous now. Not as famous as Ferreira or Juan Pablo Montoya or Sofia Vergara or Shakira, but famous, nonetheless, in her way. In Colombia, at least, and in some human rights circles too. There's a movie and a dedicated episode from a television show with fast graphics, whooshing sounds, and CSI style diagrams, though I can't really get myself to watch it that either. By Monday, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 hours before the set deadline, the bomb had exploded. Doña Elia was dead. At first, my father was bleeding out, and Colonel Santiago Roamillan had declared that this was all the FARC's doing. All we could do was try to keep up her spirits, he said. Tell her that we were doing everything possible. Then, suddenly, after so many prayers, the explosion. By the next day, the peace talks had been suspended. The rest, the colonel said, you already know. From El Gabon, the president declared that those who are violent, los violentos, have placed a collar of dynamite not merely around the neck of Doña Elia, whose death we grieve in our hearts today, but around the hope of all Colombians. 2 days later, she was laid to rest. There was a massive ceremony and procession. Men and women dressed in black beat their hearts with their fists as they walked into a chapel, declared holy Pope himself. On that same day, an anonymous call was made to a Catholic high school. Tucked inside it, like a defective gene waiting to manifest, the voice declared that there was a bomb. An article titled, "A Sum of Errors Reported," that the children ran out the school gates crying out that they did not want bombs strapped around their necks as their teachers herded them toward a park named after the very pope that declared the city holy ground. Within days of the explosion, the local FARC commander had issued a press release stating that it had not been them, after all, that local bands of extortionists, those who are violent, nothing at all to do with the armed group. And this, rather, was little more than a desperate ploy from the military to manipulate public perception and detail the peace they had all prayed for. Derail the peace they had all prayed for. Officer Jaime Lopez lost his right hand and left arm, and then, on the way to the hospital, his family lost him. Blood loss, shock, and a 5-day-old son. 3 of his peers were also severely injured in the blast. Fingers, hands, noses, and toes. Anything a man at an intersection must be that isn't nailed down gets blown off. As he stretched out, a grease-covered hand with fingers cut near the knuckle, into which I deposited money like pennies into a wishing well. Anything that isn't nailed down, shrapnel, crosses, and dynamite. Stories about farmers, soldiers, and bomb makers, everything I hear the man say that isn't nailed down. An essay like a scrapyard, but with people in it. Everything blown to shreds, torn to pieces, while men eat profusely from soggy paper appendages, while orderlists at the hospital Hospital Militar hold them down like exorcists, like live wire eels, like men in white linen shirts and blood-soaked fatigues at 3 in the morning or 4 in a red brick house or white brick house, while doctors try to cut them out of their own bodies, PVC bone and red wire arteries. The sound of handsaw, the smell of gunpowder feels true, right? Cinematic. But do you really want to know? Bomb drills in schools, the milkman at the door as the mist clears, and Jesus pulling back his robes like a girl inches up her skirt, barbed wire, thorn, steel, cut teeth around the heart hanging out of his chest, like a red pilot fish lure, a hand around a PVC pipe, around the neck, around a 5-day-old son, and a pair of disembodied legs, and I try to keep hold of a country built atop second-hand baptisms, outliners, Palestines, and poems called Hope, and I try to remember Doña Elvia Cortés Gil and forget what was done to her.
Hello. I think we have time for a couple of questions for Lina from the audience. I can bring the mic to you. There you go.
So I was wondering, just in general, but also maybe specific to this piece, there's a lot of like braiding going on and crossing over stories and ideas and things like that. And I wanted to know, like, what was your, or what is your writing process to like whittle all the things down that you want to have in the essays and things like that?
So the question is, what is my writing process, right? I aim to be, I don't think that there's competition on this, so it's one of those titles. Clint is telling you you have the largest campus in the world. Is anyone keeping track? Do you know who's second? Because if you don't know who's second, then I don't know about that, right? China exists. But I want to be the foremost expert on the great essay. I think I talked about metaphors earlier. Clint mentioned my theory that metaphors are just a confession of the failure of language. And I think that juxtaposition is the closest we get to speaking about the things that truly matter. The things that truly matter, the questions that really drive literature for me are questions that have no answers, have no easy answers, maybe no answers at all. And the only thing you can aim for is to ask the question better at the end of the essay, at the end of the story, at the end of a life experience and the extent of thinking about these things. So the graded essay is a perfect structure for that. In my mind, when content and form are done correctly, there is no separation between them. Desiree Madeleine, Spinal Comprehensive Rupture is a really great example of that. Desiree Madeleine writes this essay when she should have been studying for her comps. She does that a lot. A lot of her essays start with, I should be doing something else. And she asks the question as she's about to get a PhD, what is the knowledge worth having? Well, you spend your whole life, you spend 4, 5, 6, and some PhD, 15 years trying to get this right. And what knowledge do you have at the end of it that is worth bleeding for? Because you've bled. And it's a beautiful essay, and it's written in the form of an exam. It has multiple choice answers, and little spaces for you to answer the question of the essays. And I think that that's perfect. And I read that essay so many times, I thought about it so many times. I think the braided essay structure, if done correctly, really functions, really does its best work between the spaces of the braid. So what it's saying is these two things are not the same, but there's a space between them where our sameness can exist. So I spend a lot of time thinking about grades. I have a lot of what my friends call murder boards in my office. So there's a lot of thread, a lot of note cards, a lot of color coding. I think if it's worth writing about, then it's worth writing about the best way that you possibly can. So my process tends to be, is this worth being for? Because it's going to be hard to write. And then if that's the case, then what's the best form that it can possibly take? And if I'm going to write at the very edge of my capacities, then I try to outsource everything that I can. So it takes a certain amount of energy to remember where you last were. If you externalize that and you make a chart, or if you have a writing partner like I do, if you have somebody who will keep you in check with certain things, if you have multiple lead workshop, which I do, and you've selected. So that's how I know that I'm going to do the most when it has the least to do. So that's my process in general. I don't know if that answers your question. This is a hard essay to read, so it always takes me like a second to sort of gather myself again. So, and I also work on my lenses, so I'm not seeing very clearly right now at all. But thank you for coming.
Hello. So I have a question for Don't Come Back. Both in Don't Come Back and the essay that you read, there were a lot of themes of violence and people taking responsibility for violence or not taking responsibility, trying to avoid it. So I was wondering how you chose like what you wanted to write about to be able to encompass those kinds of themes.
How do I choose what I'm going to write about? Is that the question?
Yeah, like how did you choose how to write about the themes
Oh,
like,
how
of like
to-
violence and stuff? Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I think that part of what you're asking is like how do you choose. I think there are several questions in there. Number one is how do you choose what you're going to write about, and then how do you choose how to write the thing you want to write about. And at the center of it is there's a lot of violence. I think it would be a huge mistake. I don't know. I think the short answer is trauma. The short answer is trauma. The short answer is that I grew up with an awful lot of violence around me, in so many levels. So the most incomprehensible thing is also the most familiar thing to me. This is a horrifying thing. I've never been able to read this essay without crying. It's awful. Which is why I read it sparingly. Repetition does bring numbness, and I never want to be so numb, but I can't remember how much this hurts. So I think the question is how do I choose to write? Like I mentioned graded essay. I choose the graded form very frequently. But for this essay very specifically, I wanted to write an anti-thriller, which is why I created a countdown method. And I know that the countdown makes it's horrible to write. It was also very much, and I read it, it's cinematic. Thrillers and action movies and the things that were made based on this were made for the climax being the explosion. And if we take the climax to be the Rosetta Stone of meaning, like we're all just waiting and anticipating. And I wanted me and people who read, this is not an easy, I think, the thing to listen to either. But I think it makes us accountable in a way. Because that countdown means something's going to happen. You want the thing to like count down, you want the moment. And then I didn't write the explosion. I could have. I think that it could have put in a really big scene. But then what does it mean that we're always waiting for the explosion? What does it mean that the narrative structure that we accept, the movies that we watch, are going for the explosion rather than the loss? This was a person. She was loved. She's gone. So I created a countdown and I intentionally took away the explosion. So I think a lot about not the forms that will serve me, but the forms that the reader is familiar with. Because it's, and then I think, is this something that I can manipulate? It's much more rewarding to subvert expectations than to create expectations, right? So I know that the countdown is the easiest form in the world. How can I do something with it that would be meaningful? And that would, I think that wasn't the process. The process was I started with what is the most meaningful in the essay, what do I want to convey? And then the form comes secondary. I want them to be interwoven. I don't want them to be inspiration. Like Desiree Natalie's essay, Finding Correctness Roughly, the exam is the content is the form. So I think about them in tandem. I never think of a form and then like content. And I try to address my own writing the same way that I address my students' writing in the workshop, which is to find out what it is and then build it, rather than what it can do for me. I don't know if I could write Harry Potter. I suspect not. But even if I could, I wouldn't want to. The Harry Potter is a great good song, blah, 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 but also trans rights and all that. But mostly, it's not something I'm willing to plead for. Life is short.
Other questions? it over to Michael.
Showstopper. All right. If you would be so kind as to give all the lovely people here your thoughts and opinions on Beyonce, that'd be greatly appreciated.
You asking my opinions on Beyonce?
Yes.
And not Taylor Swift's private jets.
This is a very college tradition.
Got it. Anything specific on Beyonce?
Beyonce.
Just Beyonce. I think a lot is said about Beyonce Knowles. Not enough is said about her constant collaboration with the Chicks, is what I think. And that it was a natural progression to make this song and to enter into the country space. I will say another thing, that country has a history of country music specifically, of addressing poverty, of going to prisons, to be rebellious in every way, shape, and form, and it has been co-opted by those who do not understand rebellion. So I am very glad that Beyonce Knowles is making the reclamation. That said, also, there was very recently a Beyonce concert in Chicago, there should be more. But the wave of attractive people that I brought around by Beyonce concerts, I'm also not addressed in full. Things are full, scantily clad, very attractive people, and it was distracting to everyone and disruptive in all good ways. Was that what you had hoped I would say? Perfect.
All right, we can give one more round of applause. Thank you so much for being here.